I was rich at 31, a millionaire. And by 33, I was broke again. I was a farm boy from Idaho who got his hands on early money, and it drove me crazy. I thought wealth was spending. I thought success was showing off. And then it was gone. That was the painful wake-up call. Money doesn't make you wealthy. Philosophy does. You could hand someone a fortune, and without discipline, they'll lose it. But give someone just a little with the right rules, and they'll multiply it. And that's why I want to share with you the money rules that turned my failure into fortune, the principles that rebuilt my wealth and can build yours. Because the truth is simple. It's not about what you earn. It's about what you keep, how you grow, and the philosophy you live by. Most people spend their entire lives chasing income. But here's the truth. Income is not wealth. You can earn a six-figure salary and still be broke, because the size of the paycheck does not determine your future. It's what you keep, protect, and multiply that counts. Wealth is not built on how much flows into your hands, but on how much remains after you've paid everyone else, and how wisely you put that remainder to work. I've met people who earned small wages but lived with discipline, and over time, they built more security and freedom than people who earned 10 times as much but spent every dollar. The key is to stop confusing the illusion of income with the reality of wealth. When you measure yourself only by what you make, you miss the game entirely. A man earning $50,000 but saving and investing consistently may, in 10 years, be wealthier than the one earning $200,000, but consuming every dime. The great lesson is that wealth is measured in capital, assets, savings, investments, net worth, not just in wages. Wages make a living, but capital builds a fortune. And fortunes are built not on one big event, but on steady accumulation and growth of capital over time. So how do you turn this philosophy into action? Begin by tracking your net worth. Don't just measure your income, measure your assets, your liabilities, and the difference between them. That number, even if small or even negative, is the truth about where you are financially. And here's the good news. Once you see it, you can improve it. If you're spending every dollar, discipline yourself to keep the first 10% and put it aside. If you have debts, create a plan to reduce them so that your capital can grow unburdened. If you already have assets, make them work harder for you. I can still remember when I first learned this lesson. I was earning a decent wage, but I had nothing to show for it. I thought I was doing well because my income was better than it had been in the past. But when I was asked about my net worth, I had no answer. That was the moment I realized I had been keeping score on the wrong game. From then on, I started tracking assets, savings, and investments. Slowly but surely, the numbers grew, and with them, my confidence and freedom grew too. The principle is simple but life-changing. Income feeds your lifestyle, but capital feeds your future. Track it, grow it, protect it, and you will discover the difference between making a living and building real wealth. One of the greatest lessons in the pursuit of wealth is learning how to balance what you earn with how you live. Too many people fall into the trap of thinking that the more they make, the more they should spend. They live at the edge of their income, sometimes even beyond it, and wonder why freedom never arrives. The truth is simple. If you spend it all, you'll always be starting over, no matter how much you make. But when you learn to live on 70% of your income and redirect the rest with intention, you put yourself on the path not just to survival, but to abundance. Here's the philosophy. Wealth is not about deprivation, nor is it about reckless indulgence. It's about balance. The 70% you live on allows you to enjoy life, provide for your needs, and even some of your wants. But the other 30% is where the magic happens. 10% consistently invested grows into capital that begins to work for you. Another 10% invested in your own learning and personal development multiplies your earning power and sharpens your ability to seize opportunities. And the final 10%, given to causes and people beyond yourself, keeps your heart open and your perspective generous, creating a flow of goodwill and meaning that money alone can't buy. When I first heard this formula, I thought it was impossible. I was living on 100% of my income, and sometimes even more than that. But then I realized something. If I couldn't learn to live on 70% when I had little, I'd never learn to live on 70% when I had a lot. It's not about the amount, it's about the discipline. I started small, few dollars saved, few dollars invested, few dollars given, and a few dollars spent on books and seminars that changed my thinking. And little by little, my financial life transformed. The strategy is clear. Don't wait for the right time to begin. The right time is now. Automate the process so that as soon as income arrives, those transfers happen without depending on your willpower in the moment. Create separate accounts if you have to. One for investing, one for personal growth, one for giving, and watch the balances grow over time. Even if the amounts feel small at first, they carry a principle that is far more powerful than the numbers themselves. You see, when you direct your money with wisdom, you prove to yourself that you are in charge, not your impulses, not your expenses, not the pressures of the world. Living on 70% isn't just a financial strategy, it's a mindset of stewardship, balance, and foresight. It teaches you that money is a tool, not a master. And if you can master this discipline, you'll never again wonder where all the money went, you'll know exactly where it went, and you'll see exactly how it grows, multiplies, and comes back to serve you in the future. One of the greatest lessons about money is that it's not about how much flows through your hands, but how much you learn to keep and direct with discipline. The truth is, if you can't handle pennies, you won't be able to handle dollars. Wealth isn't built in sudden leaps. It's built in steady habits. And perhaps the most powerful of all is learning to save before you spend. Most people do the opposite. They spend what they want, live at the edge of their income, and then hope there's something left to put aside. But hope is not a strategy. If you wait until the end of the month to save, you'll discover that the month has a way of taking it all. Bills, desires, emergencies, temptations, they'll always show up to claim what's left. That's why the secret is to pay yourself first, before the landlord, before the grocery store, before anyone else gets a share. You take a portion, no matter how small, and you set it aside. That single act tells your future that it matters more than your impulses. When I first began, I had so little that the idea of saving seemed almost laughable. But I remembered a saying, discipline with a little becomes discipline with much. So I started with $1 out of 10. It wasn't much, but it planted the seed of control. And when you gain control over money, even in small amounts, something changes in your spirit. You stop being a servant to circumstances, and you start becoming a master of direction. The strategy is simple but profound. Treat yourself like your most important creditor. The government takes taxes before you see your paycheck. Why? Because they know if they waited until after you spend it, you might not send it in. That should be your approach to saving. Take it first, automatically, before you ever touch it. Set it up so that 10% of every paycheck moves into a savings account or an investment account without you thinking twice. When it's automated, it becomes effortless, and what was once a struggle becomes a natural rhythm. Here's the beauty of this habit. It isn't just about building money, it's about building character. Every time you save before you spend, you reinforce the idea that you have the discipline to put long-term prosperity above short-term pleasure. That's the same discipline that eventually allows you to invest, build businesses, and create streams of income that free you from financial struggle. So start now. Don't wait until you're making more, because the habit doesn't come with more, it comes with decision. Save the first 10% of your very next paycheck. No exceptions, no excuses. Because if you can't manage a dime out of $1, you'll never manage 1,000 out of 10,000. But if you master saving with little, you prepare yourself for the day when much flows your way. Money is one of the most powerful tools you will ever handle, but it's also one of the most dangerous if you let it take charge. If you don't manage money, money will manage you. And when money becomes the master, it doesn't lead you to freedom, it drives you into bondage. But when you make money the servant, giving it clear direction and purpose, it becomes the engine that builds your dreams, funds your goals, and multiplies your impact. The truth is, money doesn't come with instructions. $1 doesn't tell you, spend me wisely. It doesn't whisper, save me, or invest me. Left unmanaged, money always finds its way into someone else's pocket. That's why you must decide in advance where every dollar goes. Without a plan, you'll find yourself wondering at the end of the month, where did it all go? But with a plan, you'll say with confidence, here's exactly where it went, and here's exactly what it produced. When I was younger, I often thought that more money would solve all my problems. But I later discovered that without discipline, more money simply multiplies the problems. If you can't manage a small income, a larger one won't make things better. It will only make the consequences of poor management more severe. That's why philosophy matters. Money is meant to serve you, not enslave you, and the strategy is simple. Give every dollar a job before it has a chance to wander. The best way to do this is by creating a written plan, a budget, before the month even begins. Don't wait until expenses show up. Prepare for them in advance. Write it out. This portion for living, this portion for saving, this portion for investing, and this portion for giving. When each dollar has an assignment, there's no confusion, no regret, and no waste. I remember a season when I didn't have much, and I thought budgeting was only for the wealthy. But I soon realized it was the exact opposite. Budgeting was the tool that helped me become wealthy. Without it, money slipped through my fingers like sand. With it, money began to stack, grow, and work for me. It didn't matter how small the amounts were. What mattered was that I was in charge. Here's the principle. When money is your servant, you decide its direction, and it multiplies under your discipline. When money is your master, you chase it endlessly, and it slips away no matter how hard you work. So make the decision today to flip the relationship. Before the month begins, put your plan in writing. Tell every dollar where to go, and don't let a single one drift without purpose. Because in the end, wealth isn't built by chance. It's built by people who manage money with wisdom, direction, and discipline. People who understand that money is a servant, not a master. If you want to know the greatest investment you can ever make, it isn't in stocks, bonds, or real estate. The greatest investment is in you. Your skills, your knowledge, your mindset, your character, these are the real multipliers of wealth. Because here's the truth. If you give a man $1 million, but he hasn't developed himself to be worth $1 million, chances are he'll lose it. But if you take away $1 million from someone who has developed themselves into that kind of person, give them time and they'll earn it back. Wealth follows the person you become. That's why you must put yourself ahead of the assets. You see, assets without ability won't stay with you, but ability will eventually create assets. If you want to earn more, the marketplace will only pay you more for one reason, because you've become more valuable. Money doesn't flow to wishes or hopes. It flows to value. And value comes from sharpening your skills, building your mindset, and shaping your character. When I was in my early years, I thought money would come if I just worked harder. And yes, effort matters, but I soon learned that working hard on the wrong things doesn't make you rich. It just makes you tired. What changed my life was this realization: I must work harder on myself than I do on my job. That was the turning point. When I learned to communicate better, opportunities came. When I learned leadership, doors opened. When I studied persuasion and sales, my income multiplied. Skills change your future more than any single investment in a stock or property ever could. So here's the strategy. Make learning your daily ritual. Don't leave it for someday. Someday is a thief that robs people of their best potential. Pick a high-value skill, something the marketplace rewards, whether it's sales, leadership, communication, technology, or finance, and give it focused attention. Even 30 minutes a day, compounded over months and years, turns into mastery. And mastery, my friends, pays extraordinary dividends. I used to spend a small fortune on books, seminars, and tapes when I could barely afford them. Some people thought it was wasteful, but I knew that the return on those ideas, those lessons, was worth more than any stock I could buy at the time. And it proved true. The money I invested in myself came back tenfold, 100-fold, because it raised my capacity to create wealth. You see, assets can be taken away by markets, governments, or circumstance. But what you carry inside, your skills, your character, your mindset, can never be stolen. That's why it's the safest and most profitable investment you'll ever make. So before you put your money into assets, put your time into growth. Build the kind of person who can handle wealth, multiply it, and keep it. Because when you invest in yourself first, the assets will always follow. One of the greatest traps that keeps people bound in financial struggle is the misuse of debt. Debt, if handled wisely, can be a tool. But when it is used for consumption, for cars, clothes, vacations, or gadgets, it turns into chains. Borrowing money to fund a luxury is like planting weeds in your financial garden. You don't just get the momentary pleasure of the purchase. You also get the ongoing burden of repayment, interest, and stress. And over time, that stress steals your freedom. I have seen it many times. Someone making a decent income but spending beyond their means, borrowing for a lifestyle they haven't yet earned. The new car on payments, the trip put on credit, the gadgets financed over time. It all looks glamorous for a while, but here's the truth. Behind the smiles often lies anxiety, sleepless nights, and mounting obligations. That is not wealth, that is slavery dressed in fine clothes. True wealth requires patience. The principle is simple. Luxury should be bought by assets, not by wages, and certainly not by borrowed money. Imagine a man who wants a fancy watch. He could swipe the card, owe the bank, and wear the watch tomorrow. Or he could take that same money, invest it into an asset, maybe a small business, maybe a dividend-paying stock, and let that investment grow until one day the income from it buys the watch. The difference is enormous. In the first case, he has a liability. In the second, he has both the asset and the luxury, and his freedom remains intact. I remember when I wanted to upgrade my life early on, the temptation was strong because everyone else seemed to be enjoying luxuries. But I decided on a different philosophy. I said, I'll wait. I'll let my investments buy the toys. That small discipline kept me from the chains of unnecessary debt. And when I finally did buy the things I wanted, it felt different. Not because I had them, but because I knew I hadn't traded my freedom for them. They were rewards, not anchors. So here's a simple strategy you can begin today. Take one luxury expense, something you might have put on credit this month, and instead redirect that amount into an investment account. Even if it's small, that choice shifts your philosophy. You're saying, I value freedom more than appearances. I choose growth over gratification. Over time, those redirected dollars grow into a foundation of wealth that buys more luxuries than debt ever could, but this time without the stress. Wealth is not measured by what you wear, drive, or display. It's measured by freedom, by options, by peace of mind. And peace never comes through borrowed indulgence. So discipline yourself. Let your assets buy your luxuries, and you'll never mistake slavery for success. One of the most important lessons in building wealth is realizing that the marketplace doesn't respond to your needs. It responds to your value. You can stand on the street and shout, "I need more money. I need to pay the bills. I need to survive." But the market will not care. The market is not your family, your friends, or your parents. The market is a place of exchange, and it rewards only one thing: value. The bigger the problem you solve, the more people you serve, and the greater the value you bring, the larger the paycheck you attract. This is why so many people with desperate needs remain broke. They think their need is enough to guarantee success. But life doesn't work that way. I learned this early in my career when I was struggling to make ends meet. I thought if I simply worked harder, if I complained enough, or if I waited long enough, opportunity would come. But then I realized it wasn't about how hard I worked or how much I needed. It was about how much value I could bring. If I could improve my skills, expand my knowledge, and serve more people effectively, I could write my own ticket. Think about it. A janitor and a neurosurgeon may both work hard. They may both sweat and sacrifice. But the marketplace pays the neurosurgeon much more, not because of need or effort, but because of value. He has invested years in mastering a rare and critical skill that solves big problems for people. That is the difference. It's not about hours. It's about the size of the problem you solve and the skill with which you solve it. So the strategy is simple. Multiply your value, not your needs. If you want your income to double, then double the value you bring to the market. Study more, practice more, develop rare abilities, and take on challenges others avoid. Don't say, "I need a raise." Instead ask, "How can I make myself worth more to this company, this client, or this marketplace?" That shift in philosophy will change your financial destiny. And here's a practical step to start this very month. Identify one skill or service you can improve that would make you more valuable. Maybe it's communication, being able to sell, persuade, and inspire. Maybe it's technical knowledge in your field. Maybe it's leadership, the ability to guide and manage others. Whatever it is, pick one, dedicate time each day to improving it, and watch how your opportunities expand. Needs will always exist. We all have bills, responsibilities, and desires. But if you spend your life magnifying your needs instead of multiplying your value, you'll stay trapped. Shift the focus. The greater your value, the less you'll ever have to worry about needs, because the market rewards value every single time. Wages are important, but they were never meant to be the final destination. Wages will pay the bills, keep the lights on, and put food on the table. But they are limited by the hours you work and the rate someone else is willing to pay you. That's why wages make a living, but profits make a fortune. When I first started working, I thought wages were the answer. If only I could get paid a little more per hour, I'd be fine. But no matter how much my paycheck grew, the bills seemed to grow right alongside it. That's when I discovered the real truth. You must use your wages as seed money to build something beyond wages, something that can eventually set you free. The marketplace will gladly pay you wages for your labor, but you must decide to take a portion of those wages and convert them into profits by creating or investing in something of your own. That might mean starting a small business on the side, offering a service, building a product, or simply investing in assets that generate income while you sleep. The power of profit is that it doesn't require your direct presence every minute of the day. Once built, it can continue to work for you long after you've put in the initial effort. Let me give you an example. Early in my career, I had a regular job. It was fine. It paid me enough to survive. But I began setting aside part of those wages to fund a small business. At first, the business only made a trickle compared to my job. But I kept reinvesting the profits back into it, kept refining, and kept learning. Over time, those small profits grew larger until eventually they eclipsed my wages. That's when I truly understood freedom. Not freedom from work, but freedom from depending on a paycheck as my only source of income. This doesn't mean you need to quit your job tomorrow or leap into the unknown recklessly. The wise path is to let your job provide security while you use part of your wages to fund your future. Think of your wages as the seed and profits as the harvest. Without planting those wages into something that grows, you'll always be stuck eating the seed instead of enjoying the harvest. So here's a practical challenge. Define one product or service you can offer outside of your job. It doesn't have to be grand or complex. Maybe it's tutoring, consulting, creating an online course, or selling a handmade product. Maybe it's investing in a rental property or building a simple digital asset. The important part is to start. Small profits, consistently reinvested, have the power to change your financial destiny. Relying on wages alone is like rowing a boat with one oar. You'll work hard but go in circles. Add profits, and suddenly you have both oars in the water. That's when you can truly move forward toward fortune. It's one thing to make money, but it's another thing entirely to keep it. Wealth isn't measured by the size of your paycheck or even by the amount of money you bring in from your business. It's measured by what remains after life, taxes, mistakes, and emergencies have taken their share. I've seen too many people earn well, only to have nothing to show for it years later. They built houses on sand, not realizing that storms will always come. The truth is simple. It's not what you make, it's what you keep that counts. When I was young and just beginning to earn more than I ever thought possible, I believed income was the prize. But income is fleeting if it isn't guarded. I learned quickly that governments, markets, and even life itself will claim their portion whether you're ready or not. Taxes can take a bite. Inflation can erode value. A single medical emergency can wipe out years of savings. And one lawsuit can undo a decade of work. If you don't build a structure of protection around your money, then all the discipline of saving and investing can be lost in a moment. That's why the wise don't just focus on creating wealth, they focus on keeping it. Protection begins with education. Understand the rules of the game. If you don't know the basics of tax planning, you'll pay more than your fair share. If you don't study how to use simple structures like trusts, corporations, or partnerships, you'll leave your assets vulnerable. If you don't have proper insurance, you risk trading wealth for worry. Protection doesn't make you wealthy on its own, but it keeps the wealth you've already worked so hard to earn. Let me illustrate. I once knew a man who had built a fine business. He was disciplined, hardworking, and consistent. His enterprise brought in good profits, but he never thought about protecting his wealth. When an unexpected lawsuit hit, he had no legal structure to shield his assets. Years of effort vanished in court costs and settlements. Compare that with another friend who earned less, but who had wisely built a fortress around his money. He had insurance, legal structures, and tax planning in place. When his business went through a storm, he walked away with his assets intact and continued building. The difference wasn't intelligence or effort. It was foresight. Here's the practical step. Schedule a meeting with a tax professional or financial advisor. Don't leave your wealth exposed out of neglect. Ask them to identify one strategy, whether it's a tax optimization, an insurance upgrade, or a legal structure that you can implement this year to strengthen your financial defenses. Wealth once protected, can compound in peace. Wealth left vulnerable can disappear overnight. The goal is not just to create abundance, but to guard it so it remains yours. Because the true measure of wealth is not just how much you make, but how much you keep, protect, and pass on. We often want everything immediately, the reward, the recognition, the paycheck. But the truth about wealth is that it doesn't arrive as fast as effort. Wealth is built quickly in the habits you form, but slowly in the results those habits create. You can start today, but the full fruits of your labor may not show for months, years, even decades. The young man who wants to be rich overnight often fails because he confuses impatience with action. He wants results first and thinks effort is optional. But let me tell you from experience, compounding does not work on schedules we prefer. It works on the schedule of time and consistent, repeated effort. The philosophy is simple. If you develop disciplined financial habits, they will pay you handsomely, but you must be patient to let them mature. I remember my early days as a young speaker. I studied, wrote, and practiced every day, often earning barely enough to cover expenses. But I continued because I knew that each small step compounded over time. It was slow and at times discouraging, but eventually the results came. And when they did, they were far greater than any single leap I could have hoped for. The key is to act immediately on the behaviors you control and let the outcomes follow their natural course. Your strategy is clear. Act now. Prepare for tomorrow. Don't wait for the perfect moment to start saving, investing, or learning. Take small, deliberate steps today and give those steps the time they need to multiply. Wealth is rarely built in a day, but the habits you adopt today can produce exponential returns in the future. In other words, be impatient about the actions, but patient about the rewards. Here's a practical step. Choose one non-negotiable money habit, saving, investing, learning, or tracking, and commit to it for the next 12 months. Every day, reinforce the habit. Every week, check your progress. Every month, celebrate your persistence. By doing so, you're planting seeds now, knowing that when the seasons pass, those seeds will grow into a forest of financial security and opportunity. Remember, the most powerful wealth principle is to act decisively on your habits today and trust that time will produce the results. Impatience in action and patience in outcome, that is the rhythm of lasting wealth. Wealth, in its truest form, is not measured by the hours you work, but by the income your assets generate while you sleep. Many people mistake a high salary for freedom, thinking that if they work harder, they will achieve financial security. But I've learned that true freedom comes not from trading time for money, but from creating systems, businesses, or investments that work for you continuously, whether you're awake or resting. Think of it this way. Your job pays you while you're present, but assets pay you whether you're present or not. That is the essence of financial independence. The philosophy behind this is simple. Income tied to your time is limited, but income tied to assets has no ceiling. When I was starting out, I realized that if I relied solely on speaking engagements, every dollar earned was directly tied to the hours I could physically work. That was exhausting, and growth was capped. So I began investing in books, courses, and small business ventures, and I set up systems where these investments could generate returns without my constant attention. Over time, even when I wasn't actively working, the assets produced income, and my life transformed. The strategy, then, is to focus on creation, not consumption. Build something that compounds, whether it's a rental property, dividend-paying stocks, an online business, or intellectual property. Every dollar you invest in productive assets is a soldier working for you, multiplying quietly behind the scenes, but it requires discipline. You must resist the temptation to spend every paycheck and instead allocate resources toward these vehicles of long-term growth. The practical step is immediate and simple. Set up an automatic, recurring investment today. Even if it's a modest amount, consistency compounds over time. Treat this like planting seeds in a field. Each contribution is a seed, and as you water it with patience and repeat your actions consistently, the harvest will grow beyond what you could have earned by effort alone. Remember, the secret to lasting wealth is not how hard you work while awake, it is how smart your assets work while you sleep. Build systems, invest wisely, and watch your freedom multiply. Generosity is not just a noble gesture, it is a strategic principle of wealth. I've observed throughout my life that those who hoard money, fearing scarcity, rarely experience true abundance. Conversely, those who give, whether it's time, knowledge, or financial resources, often find that the act of generosity opens doors, opportunities, and resources in ways they could never have imagined. The philosophy is simple. Giving initiates a flow. Money, like energy, responds to circulation. When you hold it tightly, it stagnates. When you release it thoughtfully, it multiplies. The strategy is to make contribution a non-negotiable part of your financial plan. Giving isn't about charity alone. It's about creating a mindset of abundance. When you commit to sharing a portion of your income regularly, you train your mind to focus on value, not scarcity. You recognize that wealth is not just accumulation, but also impact. I recall my own journey, starting with almost nothing. Yet when I began allocating a small percentage of whatever little I earned to help others, whether supporting a struggling student, mentoring someone new, or giving to a cause, I noticed a shift. Doors that seemed closed opened, relationships deepened, new opportunities arrived, seemingly without effort. The practical step is clear and actionable. Allocate 5–10% of your income toward giving. Automate it if possible, treating it as an essential expense, not an optional choice. This could be to causes you believe in, mentorship of someone starting their journey, or supporting a local initiative that aligns with your values. The act itself is less important than the consistency and intention behind it. Generosity cultivates gratitude, perspective, and foresight. It reminds you that wealth is not merely the sum of dollars in your account, but the breadth of lives you touch and the influence you wield. By practicing generosity, you align yourself with the principle that the universe, business, and human networks respond to value shared, not value hoarded. In this practice, you do not lose. You gain in reputation, relationships, and opportunities. Remember, the more you give wisely, the more abundant your life becomes, not only in finances, but in meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. Generosity is the multiplier of true wealth. Wealth is often misunderstood. Many people equate a high paycheck with being rich, yet history and experience show us otherwise. You could earn a fortune and remain broke if your liabilities outpace your assets. If every dollar earned is spent before it's even counted. True wealth is measured not by the numbers on your paycheck, but by the net value of all you own after subtracting what you owe. As Benjamin Franklin once said, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. And I would add, knowledge of your own finances pays dividends too. The strategy is to make it a habit to review your financial position regularly. Don't wait for a crisis, an opportunity, or a tax season to check where you stand. Once a month, take the time to calculate all assets: cash, investments, real estate, business equity, and subtract all liabilities: loans, credit card debt, and obligations. This simple act turns the abstract concept of wealth into a tangible reality you can measure, monitor, and grow. It creates clarity and allows you to make better decisions with confidence because you know exactly what you're working with. The practical step is immediate. Tonight, create a simple net worth spreadsheet. List your assets on one side, your liabilities on the other, and calculate the difference. Update it monthly. Track the trends. Celebrate the growth, no matter how small, and scrutinize the areas of leakage. You'll notice patterns and gain insights that a paycheck alone cannot provide. This act transforms your relationship with money from reactive to proactive. I recall early in my own journey, I tracked my net worth carefully while living on very little. Every dollar accounted for, every small asset noted, and every debt tracked. It was this disciplined review that allowed me to see opportunities, avoid unnecessary spending, and reinvest wisely. It was the difference between living paycheck to paycheck and building a foundation of lasting wealth. Remember, income is temporary. Net worth is lasting. Focus on the numbers that truly matter, and your wealth will follow. Too often, we allow money to slip through our fingers without a second thought. We spend, we swipe, we pay, and then wonder why we never seem to get ahead. Yet wealth is never about how much you make. It's about how much you keep, and more importantly, how effectively your money works for you. Every dollar you earn is a worker, and like any worker, it must be directed with purpose. If you fail to ask the right questions, that dollar becomes a burden rather than an asset. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." I would say, your financial success depends upon the quality of the questions you ask about your money. The strategy is simple but profound. Question every expenditure. Before buying, pause and ask yourself, does this build or drain me? If the answer is drain, redirect that money to something that builds, whether it's savings, investments, or personal development. Challenge recurring expenses first. Those habitual leaks are the silent thieves of wealth. Even small amounts, when compounded monthly, create substantial growth over time. For example, a modest $50 monthly subscription redirected into a long-term investment over 10 years could become thousands, while the expense simply disappears into nothing. The practical step is immediate. Choose one recurring expense today, something automatic that you barely notice, and redirect it into savings or an investment account. Track it. Watch it grow. You are training yourself to see money as a tool, not a temptation, and in doing so, you shift from passive spending to active wealth building. I remember early in my career, I began asking these questions about every purchase, no matter how small. Coffee, magazines, meals out, all scrutinized. The results weren't instant, but over months, my savings and investments began to compound quietly. It wasn't about depriving myself. It was about giving every dollar a job and purpose. Wealth begins when your money answers the questions you ask, not the impulse of your momentary desires. Ask better questions, and your money will start working as hard as you do. Wealth, in its truest sense, is never just the numbers in a bank account. Many chase money as if it were the ultimate prize, yet I have found that true wealth is measured not in currency, but in the principles, habits, and wisdom we pass on to others. Benjamin Franklin once said, "An investment in knowledge pays the best interest." I would add that an investment in values and disciplines, the lessons we teach those around us, yields a legacy far beyond any sum of money. If we focus solely on accumulating dollars without passing on the knowledge to manage, grow, and give them wisely, we leave a hollow inheritance. True wealth is enduring. It multiplies when principles are shared and applied consistently across generations. The strategy is simple, though not always easy. Focus on teaching the disciplines that create wealth. Saving, investing, giving, and managing time are skills that compound just like money. When a child or loved one sees you make deliberate financial choices, they absorb more than the act, they absorb the mindset. Imagine your family watching you set aside 10% of your income for investment, 10% for giving, and 10% for education, consistently every month. They don't just see money being handled, they see priorities being set, self-discipline in action, and long-term thinking taking root. This is the silent inheritance, the knowledge that equips them to manage and multiply resources wisely long after you are gone. The practical step is immediate and tangible. Choose one money principle and share it this week. Perhaps it's the habit of paying yourself first, or the idea that money is a tool for value creation rather than instant gratification. Explain not only the action but the why behind it. Storytelling works powerfully here. Share an experience from your own life where discipline, patience, or prudent investment made a difference. Children, spouses, and loved ones often learn more from lived examples than lectures. Even a simple conversation about how to manage allowances, savings, or small earnings can plant the seeds of lifelong financial wisdom. I recall a time when I began sitting with my children and discussing the lessons I was learning about saving and investing. Initially, it was uncomfortable for them and for me. I wasn't sure they were paying attention. But over months, they began asking questions, offering insights, and gradually absorbing the mindset of responsible wealth management. That investment in their understanding was more valuable than any dollar I could leave.